You are listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski and I will be your host on this adventure. Today we're talking about the news of November 10th, the year 2020. Most of what we're seeing today has to do with voter fraud. Now I know that you're going to see people like Shepard Smith and Neil Cavuto telling us that no voter fraud exists. USA Today, New York Times, they're all out there telling us that no evidence of voter fraud exists. I don't know, maybe they're just blind or something. But before I get into that, I want to kind of mock Joe Biden, if you'll let me. This guy is, he's just a puppet. I did an article over at Red States, you might want to go read, as to why the Democrats nominated Joe Biden, why they chose him. And that's because he's a puppet. I mean, Bill Clinton was a puppet. Barack Obama was a puppet. Hillary Clinton was a puppet. And Joe Biden is a puppet. But anyways, he's up there in his puppet stage with his nice, rich blue background. And on the wall behind him, it says, Office of the President-elect. The problem is that there is no office of the President-elect. We first saw this back in 2008 when Barack won the presidency. The dude had zero experience. He voted present most of the time in the Senate, and yet, they had to make him look important. They had to make him look official, this young guy, and so they created this aura of gravitas, if you will, and they gave him the office of the president-elect. I laughed when I saw it then, and I laugh even more when I see it now with Joe Biden out there. Back in 2008, it was to make Barack Obama look more important. This time, it's to help gaslight the American public. They want people to believe that Joe Biden is going to be the next president, and he's just in the on-deck circle. That's not how it works. There is no office of the president-elect. It's just kind of comical. I just wanted to make mention of that. And I'm really hoping that maybe one of our senators like Ted Cruz will just blast Joe Biden about that. But anyways, let's move on to some of this voter fraud. USA Today headline, fact check. Wisconsin County did not have a glitch that stole votes from Trump. I don't know. I'm watching some of these videos where they're showing the vote count on the chyron at the bottom of the screen. And it's amazing to me when I watched a video showing votes drop from Trump's total, and all of a sudden the same number of votes get added to Biden's total. You would probably want to call that computer error or something, but how can someone go down in vote count and the other person go up automatically, the same number in vote count? Just looks kind of fishy to me, and it probably ought to be investigated. Sean Davis over on Twitter posted images of a sworn affidavit from a whistleblower in Clark County, Nevada, saying here's proof of poll workers fabricating proof of residence data for illegal voters, that they had shipped in ballots from out of state, and people are sitting there marking that these people are Nevada residents. Kind of crazy. Here's evidence over in Michigan. More than 10,000 dead people cast ballots in Michigan. According to an analyst, over 9,500 voters confirmed dead through the Social Security Death Index are all marked as having mailed in ballots. In fact, nearly 2,000 of those people are over 100 years old, and those people are not listed anywhere as being alive. So I would say that's something that needs to be investigated. Why Shepard Smith would cut away from President Trump, and why Neil Cavuto would cut away from the president's press secretary, saying that there's no evidence of these things, when in fact there is evidence of these things. Elizabeth Harrington over on Twitter, and I will link to these things in the show notes down below. She tweets about a Detroit poll watcher who says that at 4:30 in the morning on November 4th, tens of thousands of ballots were delivered from out of state. Listen to that. Tens of thousands of ballots. I don't know, Neil Cavuto, don't you think that's evidence that needs to be investigated? I'm going to quote here from this affidavit. Unlike the other ballots, these boxes were brought in from the rear of the room. I specifically noticed every ballot I observed was cast for Joe Biden. There were two men in charge of the counting, one in his 30s, one in his 50s. At approximately 4:30 a.m. on November 4th, 2020, the man in his 50s got on the microphone and stated that another shipment of absentee ballots would be arriving and would have to be counted. I heard other challengers say that several vehicles with out-of-state plates pulled up to the TFC Center a little before 4:30 a.m. and unloaded boxes of ballots. At approximately 4:30 in the morning, tens of thousands of ballots were brought in and placed on 8 long tables. Unlike the other ballots, these boxes were brought in from the rear of the room. The same procedure was performed on the ballots that arrived at 4:30, but I specifically noticed that every ballot I observed was cast for Joe Biden. If you want to hear even more, over on Twitter are some videos of Rudy Giuliani being interviewed, and he points out that we've got enough election fraud exposed in Michigan to flip Michigan back to Trump. Pictures of hundreds of ballots without envelopes, pictures of thousands of ballots just sitting in a box, no protection, no security, brought in at 4 o'clock in the morning in Detroit. Over on PJ Media, Ronna McDaniel, RNC Chair, presented 131 affidavits. Is that enough for you, Neil Cavuto? 2,800 incident reports of alleged voter fraud in Michigan. And yet, they're still saying we need evidence? You know, I think our deep state actually runs much deeper than most people think. To have this kind of voter fraud, this far spread, and this deep, the tentacles of the deep state are long. And I think our corporate media is complicit. And I think we need to start looking at how we define treason a little more. Take a look at the U.S. Code for Treason and see if you think some of that applies. I'll leave that up to you. But I also want to point your attention to a column over at Uncover DC with my colleague Brian Cates. He wrote a column today called "The Corporate Media Has Become a Cancer That Must Be Destroyed." And I'm specifically going to call your attention to the last couple of sentences. He says, instead of being a benefit to the public and engaging in a much needed public service, the corporate media has turned itself into the propaganda arm of a corrupt and radical political party. Far from being a positive influence in this country, the mainstream media has become a poisonous cancer. Because the mainstream corporate media has failed so miserably at its job, it is far past the time that they were replaced. And then he says, and the rising new media outlets like Uncover DC and the Epoch Times welcome that challenge. And I would add Red State to that as too, seeing as how I write for Red State as well. And I also write for Uncover DC and anybody else that I decide to write for in the future, because I'm not going to be writing for any mainstream medias. Along with this idea of major media needing to be replaced, let me call your attention to something that Megyn Kelly tweeted, and other people have as well. But this guy named John Meacham was on MSNBC commenting on Joe Biden's speech. He's a paid pundit for MSNBC. He gets up and he comments on Joe Biden's speech the other night on Saturday. What he didn't disclose was that he wrote the speech. Talk about corruption in the media. Talk about gaslighting us. Here's a guy who writes the speech for Joe Biden, and then he goes on TV and he comments on the speech, doesn't tell anybody that he wrote it, and he's commenting on it and it's helping the viewers understand what it's about, as if he's some sort of special guy. And one more piece of icing on the cake for the media thing. Scott Adams, creator of Dilbert, tweeted out today, one of these things is true. Either Trump is irrationally clinging to hope, or he has seen more than the public has seen so far about election fraud, and he's letting the press hang itself before revealing it. I am tending to believe the latter is true. All right. I was going to talk about masks. There's been some stuff in the news about mask efficacy. But I think I'm going to save that for another day. It's not quite as a hot button quite yet, although we do have states like Utah that have just instituted mask mandates. I may actually do just a separate podcast on this altogether. The mask mandates are asinine. They are stupid because masks do not prevent the spread of coronavirus. There's ample research out there. There's lots of studies even being retracted saying that they work. So we'll talk more about that on an upcoming podcast. I'm just a little bit upset that so many people in the media, so many people that we have trusted over the years to give us news, are now lying to us. I think it's a sad time in America, and I think Brian Cates is right. I think it's time to replace the mainstream media. I think it's time to possibly look at that section in the U.S. Code that has to do with treason. I've had enough. Our country's been put through the ringer. They're trying to steal the country from us. They're trying to take us away from constitutional rule into a Marxist society, and it needs to stop. And we can stop it. We can't sit back. We have to do something. We have to say something. We have to be vocal. We must follow the rule of law. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap up. This is Daniel Bobinski with the New Book of Daniel podcast. If you'd like to reach me, just drop me an email, newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. And you can find me on all the major social media platforms by searching New Book of Daniel. You can also follow my writings over on Uncover DC and on Red State. And I will catch you on the next show. Until the next time, be blessed.